Hi everyone, this is me back after my YouTube ban. I'm not sure how long I will last on this platform. It's 3 strikes and you're out, and I'm sitting at 2. So if I go silent, which you all know is out of character, I would be really, really honored if you came and found me on BitChute. Thank you. And now I have something to read to you. I was inspired by listening to Cindy, Mark and Julianne's talk to revisit the Scottish curriculum. And for the purposes of this brief presentation, if you haven't seen the conversation that I'm talking about, the aspect that intrigued me was the discussion around communitarianism and neuro-linguistic programming. And for those that are new to the terms communitarianism and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, if I said them one more time, I would have NLP'd you. A very basic definition of the former is that the greater good trumps any other concern. And NLP is a type of communication which has been used for decades to deliver information in a format which is designed to be neurologically invasive. So, as I have said, I was inspired by this wonderful talk to revisit the Scottish curriculum. Well, initially I was inspired to look into when and why education became compulsory in the UK, what was taught and how that teaching with respect to the curriculum evolved. I was looking for evidence of neuro-linguistic programming because I was interested to find out when the UK government first used it as a tactic to condition the British people. Journeying through this brief foray into the history of British education, I was reminded that in the beginning, the poor were only to learn to read, write, and do arithmetic. This was called the 3 R's, which I think is evidence of early neuro-linguistic programming itself, as you will still get people referring to it in the UK now. The first time I heard it, I thought it was really bizarre as an educational acronym for reading, writing, and arithmetic, using as it does the wrong letters to represent words, and in one case, not even reflecting the accurate phonetic articulation, unless you pronounced it arithmetic, in which case using the letter R only served to reinforce a difference in pronunciation that distinguished a lesser social class. Anyway, at the advent of compulsory education, the masses were taught only the 3 R's because it was thought that anything else would give them ideas above their station. As an aside, it strikes me that this could have been education at its unadulterated best, if, of course, those people had had access to books and a forum for conversation, which they didn't. Anyway, it's very clear that from the onset, the government has used the education system to mold the public in whatever way that they perceived would make it less of a threat to the ruling classes. At this stage, I decided to hop over to the Scottish education system because this use of the curriculum to control the masses caused a flicker in my brain, connecting the concept with something that I had seen before. When I was studying for my postgrad in education, I was presented with the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, and I remember at the time objecting strenuously in my head because whether it was a good curriculum wasn't something that we were set to discuss. Instead, we were asked to consider the best way to implement it, and in this way distracted from questioning the principles themselves. Anyway, the memory of extreme indignance came to mind, so I found a copy of the current Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, interested to see which bit had rubbed me up the wrong way. And to be honest, I'm amazed at the self-restraint and saddened by the hopelessness that must have combined to keep me silent all those years ago. At that point, I had lived in Britain for about 13 years, and I was so used to seeing things emanating from the government or mass media that I found startling in terms of being either extraordinarily controlling or morally bankrupt. And I had so often been ridiculed or pitied for being too sensitive or naive for voicing my concerns that I went through a long period, a decade, maybe 2, of despair, where I gave up trying. But here I am back again. So, what was contained in this curriculum for excellence that I instinctively found so repugnant? Well, instituted in 2010 and updated in 2019, I now have the confidence, the framework, and the vocabulary to assert that the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence constitutes a glowing example of New World Order educational indoctrination, which is wantonly and purposefully destroying the individuality of our children and turning them into good little communitarians without a hope in hell of surviving the trans-humanism agenda with their DNA intact. There are 4 core principles of the Curriculum for Excellence, and you literally don't have to go any further than these to see the problem. Our children are to be successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens, and effective contributors. It doesn't take a 7-year-old to see the problem here, but as it happens, one of my 7-year-olds was quick to point out that being a successful learner is not the same as being a successful thinker. We are teaching our children to be good at regurgitating the information that they're presented with, not to be able to source and weigh up information from which to formulate and articulate personal thoughts. If our children grow up to be people who can learn, but don't think, then they're the perfect automatons for governmental propaganda programming. The dogma about confident individuals, as I'm sure you would now expect, is all about resilience, as though living through extreme adversity is a norm that children should be able to endure with a positive attitude, where positivity is a drive to encourage people to think the way that the world is being governed and the terrible effect that it is having on the bonds that are so vital to healthy human well-being should be ignored in favor of a positive attitude. As if to be unhappy when your bodily autonomy is threatened, your every move is being surveilled, and your behavior is being blockchained, is abnormal. I credit Cindy with that particular insight. Being a responsible citizen is all about recognizing how important it is to behave in ways that can have a positive effect on other people and the environment, which sounds benign enough until you start thinking about the fact that the sentence could have been phrased, behaving in ways that don't have a negative effect on other people and the environment. The underlying principle being that your obligation to contribute is an absolute, bearing in mind that for the good of the collective has been used since time immemorial, but in particular in recent history by the Nazis to excuse their eugenics agenda. The idea being that they needed to cull or sterilize those they identified as life unworthy of life in order to preserve Aryan purity. And don't even get me started on effective contributors. This one is just pure, unadulterated communitarianism. Why should our children be compelled to be effective contributors? Effective contributors to what exactly? And by whose definition of effective? Even the language used about the role of the teacher should be a huge red flag. The role of the teacher is the key to the successful implementation of a curriculum for excellence, the quality of learning and teaching in every classroom, and the inspiration, challenge, and enjoyment which can come from teachers' enthusiasm and commitment will be critical to achieving our aspirations for all young people. Who is our? I'll tell you who our is. Our is the government. The entire syllabus is about creating uniformity in the population and encouraging our children not to think, but to learn, to be good citizens rather than to talk about whether they have any obligation to the state, to contribute to the community rather than to talk about what community is, whether it exists anymore, and if so, what contribution, if any, should be mandatory. The whole Scottish curriculum, and I would hazard a guess that it is representative of that of all other Western nations, is based on the presumption that the greater good trumps all other concerns. whereas it should be about giving our children the wherewithal to think about and discuss issues like whether the greater good does indeed trump all other concerns, or whether the personal well-being of any given individual is essential for any collective concern that they may choose to engage in to flourish in the first place. Thank you guys so much for listening. I've missed you. I love you. Goodbye.